this Christmas.
Manx Radio's Update with Dave Moore.
The time is 5 o'clock. You're listening to Manx Radio. I am Dave Moore, and this is Update. Welcome to the programme. Half an hour of the latest news in the Isle of Man, plus sport, business, travel updates, along with the newsmakers in person. Coming up, climate change has dominated proceedings in Tynwald today. We'll wrap up exactly what's been said. The Department of Home Affairs has responded to online calls for the resignations of its minister and prison governor. And are we happy? The latest social attitude survey results have been published by the Isle of Man government. That's all coming up in the next 30 minutes. But first of all, the update news headlines with Lewis Foster. Fastamai.
Tynwald has rejected plans for a referendum on whether the Isle of Man should abandon its net zero policy. Members backed a government amendment removing the proposal following an extensive debate on legality, costs and long-term planning. Supporters of the referendum argued the public should have a direct say, while opponents warned a binary vote would oversimplify a complex issue. The decision means the island's existing climate commitments under the Climate Change Act 2021 remain in place. The Department of Home Affairs has issued a statement following the sentencing of a convicted sex offender who committed his latest offences whilst released from prison early on licence. It says a petition is calling for the resignation of the DHA minister and the prison governor. Thomas James Hall was released automatically as per the Custody Act 1995, which calls for the release of a short-term detainee once they've served half of their sentence. You can find the full statement at manxradio.com. And the Isle of Man has retained its strong credit rating from respected international credit agency Moody's. The island's real GDP growth has averaged an estimated 1% per year between 2014 and 2024. The latest international news, Sir Keir Starmer's joined the French and German leaders for talks with Donald Trump about a Ukraine peace plan. Downing Street says they agreed it was a critical moment and intensive work continues on a proposed deal. Earlier, the UK Prime Minister was questioned about Ukraine in the Commons after Mr Trump described Europe as decaying and weak.
What I see is a strong Europe, united behind Ukraine and united behind our long-standing values of freedom and democracy, and I will always stand up for those values and those freedoms.
Sophie Kinsella, the best-selling author of the Shopaholic series of novels, has died. She was just 55 years old and had been battling brain cancer. And this year's Nobel Peace Prize ceremony has taken place, but the winner wasn't there to receive the award. The daughter of Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado accepted it on behalf of her mother, who's been in hiding since last year's elections. Those are the headlines. I'll be back with the news at 6.
Jeremiah Lewis. On to the weather. Dry but largely cloudy this evening, although still feeling rather breezy in the strong southwest winds. Remaining dry overnight with minimum temperatures of 9 Celsius. Dry and bright at first tomorrow. Outbreaks of rain will develop, though, later in the afternoon, possibly turning heavy at times. Strong southwest winds for much of the day, veering west later and easing. Best temperature tomorrow around 12. A fine and dry day on Friday. Sunny spells, moderate to fresh southwest winds, and maximum temperatures then of 11 Celsius.
Manx Glass and Glazing can supply and install single, double and triple glazing. Call 674 573 or visit the showroom on the Snugborough Trading Estate.
Cruise Bereavement Support Isle of Man offers free and confidential support for anyone grieving, but we can't do it alone. Donate 10 to Cruise and your £10 will help children, young people and adults. Go to cruise.org.im to make a donation.
Visit SMS Trading at 3 St Paul's Square, Ramsey. For flat pack to fully built, new or second-hand furniture, SMS Trading offer all island delivery and man in a van service. Call 315151 or find SMS Trading on Facebook.
At Begode Cachery, we have been caring for animals for over 50 years. As a cachery, we care for customers' cats and treat them as our own. Contact Begode Cachery on 676 947 or find Begode Cachery on Facebook.
Craving authentic Filipino flavours? Visit Casalo Filipino Cuisine. We cook with love and passion. Open Tuesday to Saturday from 11 a.m. to 9 p.m. Eat in or take away. 66 Box Road, Douglas. Or call 333 690.
You're listening to the Isle of Man's quintessential daily news and current affairs roundup. Update on Manx Radio.
As we heard on the news there from Lewis, Tynwald has voted against progressing calls for a referendum on government's net zero policies. Middle MHK Stu Peters had hoped to pass the reins to the public, coinciding with next year's general election, to determine whether to abandon the policy of achieving net zero carbon emissions as laid out within the Climate Change Act 2021. Here's a flavour of what just some of the MHKs and MLCs had to say.
I last spoke against the huge cost of climate change spending a year ago in this place and failed to convince this honourable court to review the colossal cost to our taxpayers of achieving net zero. I accepted that democracy had been served. But much has happened since then. More and more nations and jurisdictions have concluded that whilst the idea of a greener and cleaner future using renewable energy is to be admired, the cost of doing so at sufficient scale is adding an unbearable burden to the beleaguered taxpayer and sacrificing economic growth.
Drawing on experience from other jurisdictions, we know referendums are vulnerable to misinformation and lobbying, and that any referendum would require the investment of time and resources in order to ensure that an informed view is harnessed, which at a time of an election may be particularly difficult. It's important to also consider the outward optics of a referendum and the reputational risk that would be carried by supporting this motion as it is written.
I just don't find this such a simplistic matter as the Honourable Mover does, and I'm not clear what a vote simply on net zero emissions will actually achieve, given that it is a far more complex subject than just simply one isolated headline.
Burning fossil fuels, especially on the scale we currently practice around the world, is harmful to living organisms, living things. Fossil fuels have facilitated human development, there's no doubt, but at a massive cost to the environment.
This is not democracy. This is forum shopping. This is what happens when you lose a vote and decide that the voters, Tynwald, got it wrong. And here's the clever part. If we reject this motion, we will be accused of denying democracy and refusing to let the people have their say. But that accusation will be built on false premise. This is not a reason to hold a referendum. This is a reason to respect the democratic process we've already followed. Just last year, during the December 2024 debate, the honourable member who now proposes this referendum described net zero as, and I quote from Hansard, a religion, a cult even, based on unproven science, motivated at a very high level, I suspect, by bad actors. He further claimed that the Great Barrier Reef and polar bears are thriving, that increase in CO2 levels is actually greening the planet and increasing crop yields.
Well, we only have to look at the reality, not that far away across the water, of what referendums actually do. We find by looking at the UK that actually it causes more division, not unity, if you look at the referendums the UK's had since 1997. The problem with referendums is that you end up with half the country demanding that the results be respected, and the other half says the public were uninformed or lied to and demands a second go.
Middle MHK Stu Peters, Environment Minister Claire Barber, Chief Minister Alfred Cannon, MLC Paul Crane, MLC Gary Clewett and Cabinet Office Minister David Ashford. Just a few of the voices you heard there talking about the call for a referendum on government's net zero policies. The Department of Home Affairs has responded to an online petition which was launched following the sentencing of a convicted sex offender who committed his latest crimes when released early on licence from jail. It also called for the resignations of Home Affairs Minister Jane Poole-Wilson and the prison governor Leroy Bonnick. Lewis Foster has this report, which, I must warn you, includes details some listeners may find distressing.
Thomas James Hall appeared in court on the 27th of November from custody after he'd been caught masturbating on a bus. Mr. Hall subsequently pleaded guilty to the offence of sexual activity in a public place, causing alarm, harassment or distress and breaching an early release licence. As per Isle of Man Today's reporting of sentencing on Tuesday the 2nd of December, he was fined £500 and released to Tremode House. In the days since, a petition has been launched online calling into question the early release model and demanding key resignations, along with the recall of Mr. Hall to prison. However, Mr. Hall was released automatically as per the Custody Act 1995, which calls for the release of a short-term detainee, those with a sentence of less than 4 years, once they've served half of their sentence. He was serving 2 years and 10 months for indecently assaulting a 15-year-old schoolgirl who he lured to his flat by promising her vapes and alcohol. Therefore, he was eligible for release at the halfway point, subject to licensing conditions. Upon seeing the petition online, Manx Radio approached the Department of Home Affairs for comment. In a statement, a spokesperson told us, in Mr. Hall's case, as an offender with a short-term sentence, he was required to be released on licence, by law, at the halfway point of his sentence, reduced further for any time spent on remand. A person released on licence means they are subject to certain conditions and are supervised by the Isle of Man Probation Service. In the case of sex offenders, this includes conditions relating to their offending behaviours. In relation to Mr. Hall specifically, following the offence, the Probation Service has introduced additional measures to reduce the risk to the public. If a person breaches their licence during the period it is in place, i.e. fails to comply with the conditions, they are guilty of an offence, liable on summary conviction to a fine. The court may suspend their licence for up to 6 months and require them to be recalled to prison. It is only the court, it says, which is empowered to require the individual's return to prison in these circumstances.
You're listening to the Isle of Man's quintessential daily news and current affairs roundup. Update on Manx Radio.
The government's produced the latest Isle of Man social attitude survey. Its findings are very similar to those of previous years, with a few exceptions. Simon Richardson's here. He's been looking at the findings.
Well, Dave, I'll begin with pointing out that this year's report included a number of questions concerning immigration, race and ethnicity, crime, justice and health that were not present in previous surveys. The overall picture, though, is similar to the survey held in 2024. However, there appears to be increasing dissatisfaction concerning the Isle of Man's political system. There's also an indication that public attitudes have grown somewhat less favourable towards inward migration.
We'll come to that in a moment, but Simon, are we happy?
I'm happy, Dave. I'm delighted you asked me that, though. On average, the population expresses moderate levels of happiness and satisfaction with life. Overwhelmingly, people also regard the Isle of Man, or at least their neighbourhoods, as being safe, with only low incidences of crime reported. Many also express a strong emotional attachment to the island, yet conversely there's a substantial percentage who say they've considered or are currently thinking about leaving. Now, the most common reasons for this are concerns about the quality of life and work opportunities on the island. There's also a desire to be closer to family, dissatisfaction with transport links to and from the island, and concern about the way it's governed.
Well, you did mention earlier that there was an increase in dissatisfaction concerning politics in the Isle of Man. What do people think?
Well, politically, those who responded say they engage with current affairs and public trust in the major democratic and government institutions such as Tynwald, its branches, and the Council of Ministers is relatively low and has seen a decrease since 2024. A majority of people who responded are in favour of at least some, as opposed to little or no, inward migration, regardless of whether this is composed of the same race or ethnic group as the majority of the Isle of Man's current population, or a different race or ethnic group, or those from a poorer country. There was, however, a slight preference for people from the first of these groups, and some indications that approval of inward migration of people from the latter group has fallen somewhat. On average, there's a belief that inward migration does more good than bad for the Isle of Man's economy.
OK. Anything else that the survey revealed?
Well, socially, more than 80% of people are largely accepting of gay and lesbian members of the community. In terms of crime, there are sizable levels of distrust in the legal system on the Isle of Man, with the vast majority believing crime has either stayed the same or increased over the past 12 months. Now, a large majority single out drugs and drug-related crime as being the most serious issue in the island. Finally, many consider themselves to be in good health, but there appears to be a relatively low awareness of the risks posed by eating an unhealthy diet and the consumption of alcohol. Elsewhere, there's a strong belief that government should prioritise screening in the fight against cancer.
Thank you, Simon. If you want to see the full findings, then they do make interesting reading. Go to the Isle of Man government's website. It's very easy to find. You are listening to Update on Manx Radio. Tynwald has been debating an independent review that's found the island's current health and social care model isn't operating as intended 4 years after the creation of Manx Care. The Mersey Internal Audit Agency report found structural, financial and governance weaknesses across both Manx Care and the Department of Health and Social Care and outlines 4 strategic options for reform. One of those with views on the matter was Chief Minister Alfred Cannon, who praised frontline staff but questioned why operational issues continued to dominate debate if Manx Care has a board in place.
The importance and relevance of what is happening in health and social care remains hugely significant for all of us, not least because of the cost of delivery, which is increasing and which is significant. I do ask a question, what is the purpose of the board? What is the purpose of having a professional board in place if we then have to have a lecture from the Speaker about what needs to happen if we're going to square the circle and push the organisation forward? Seriously, we shouldn't be in here lecturing an organisation on its business performance if we've hired a professional board. One of the recommendations of Sir Jonathan Michael was to put in place this board, put in place an arm's length body, give them the professionalism and the tools and the oversight they needed to push forward. And yet we're still here in a position where we are talking about flaws in delivery, funding models, strategic delivery, people not looking ahead and just being sucked into the day-to-day problems, the same old issues that have been facing the organisation for some considerable time and period. So there really is a question mark, rightly highlighted in this report, about governance and what it means and what it should mean. And I'd also sort of extend that into saying, the issues that have been highlighted do need to be addressed now. Particularly, I think, most exemplified when it comes to finance, but I suspect exemplified in other areas, including who gets what from transitional funding and transformational funding and who's doing what on an operational level. Because you can't have 3 or 4 sets of people trying to figure out the same question. What is that all about? Because we endlessly seem to be going round in circles. And who is ultimately accountable for this? These questions need some more rigorous attention, and that will be part of the challenge that the Minister will face in the next 3 months. And I think all of us need to input into this.
Manx Radio Travel, serviced by Quayside Tyres.
Let's start at the airport, and the the Aer Lingus flight to Dublin is due to take off on time any moment now. Loganair, the Liverpool flight at 20 to 7 is showing us on time. However, EasyJet's Gatwick flight, which was due to depart at 20 past 7, is now showing us 8:15, but check in as normal. And finally, the Loganair flight to Edinburgh is showing us on time at 5 to 8. So in terms of the arrivals, with everything really looking good apart from that one, so Loganair Manchester is due in on time at 5 past 6. That Gatwick is due in at 7:45. It was supposed to be on the island at 10 to 7, so EasyJet Gatwick now at 7:45. The Edinburgh is on time, landing at 25 past 7. Loganair's London City flight is due in at 10 past 8. And finally, the Liverpool Loganair service is due to land at Ronaldsway at 8:30 this evening. And in terms of the sailings, at the moment, Maxman is yet to arrive. It's showing as arriving in at 25 to 7. It departed Heysham at 10 to 3 this afternoon. However, the 7:15 sailing from Douglas to Heysham has been cancelled.
Manx Radio Travel, serviced by Quayside Tyres. Call Quayside Tyres on 664417 to book your free vehicles winter check so your vehicle is safe for you and other road users.
Work's begun on the first comprehensive dictionary of the ancient Celtic languages spoken in Ireland and Britain. The project will compare linguistic evidence from across the islands dating back to around 500 AD. It'll draw on Celtic place names and personal names recorded in Greek and Latin texts, inscriptions from Roman Britain, and early Irish and British inscriptions using the Ogham alphabet. Modern Celtic languages, including Irish, Welsh, Scots Gaelic, Breton, Cornish and Manx, all derive from these earlier tongues. The 3-year project is being led by Dr. Simon Rodway, a senior lecturer at Aberystwyth University.
Basically, because most of the information we've got will be personal and place names, and they tend to have, more than one, typically 2 elements. So, to give an example, the ancient name of Carmarthen in West Wales is Mori Dunum, and that's made up of 2 elements, Mori, which means sea, and Dunum, which means a fort. So we would have an entry for Mori under M, and we'd have an entry for Dunum under D, and we would give the modern and medieval Celtic words which correspond to those words. We would have a look at the etymology, looking at other Indo-European languages and things like that, and then we'd have a list of all of the names, personal names, place names, etc., that contain this element.
What will we be able to take from what you discover? What is it that you're hoping to achieve?
Well, I think what we'd really like to be able to achieve is a better understanding of what these languages were like in the earliest period. I mean, I think this is something which is of great interest to people who speak modern Celtic languages or are interested in modern Celtic languages or are perhaps learning them or studying them. But I think it's also something which is interesting for other people in Britain and Ireland because, of course, sort of place names, even in parts of England that have been English-speaking for centuries, you can see Celtic place names. One example which I have spoken about is Morecambe in Lancashire, which has the same first element as Moridunum, the name of Carmarthen that I just mentioned. So that's an example where you've got, a Celtic place name in England. And I think that takes us back to a very ancient level in those places. So I think it's kind of general interest. And of course, for scholars of Celtic languages and of Indo-European languages in general, it's going to be very useful to have all this information together in one place.
You're listening to the Isle of Man's quintessential daily news and current affairs roundup. Update on Manx Radio.
We're talking housing now, as government wants your views on proposals for changes to the Shared Equity Purchase Assistance Scheme. It aims to make home ownership on the island more accessible and affordable. It's hoped it will come into effect from April the 1st next year. For the fixed scheme, first-time buyers fall under. Key changes look at resetting income thresholds and extending the interest-free period for new loans. While under the choice scheme, proposals include increasing the maximum loan assistance, introducing fixed-value repayment options, and a reduction in the residency requirement from 5 years to 1. It was something that was questioned and criticised yesterday during Tynwald Question Time.
Many people have questioned the possibility that despite not qualifying for residency until after 5 years, new arrivals might qualify for support after only a matter of months.
Consultation is live, so really the place to provide that feedback is via the consultation. That would be really helpful. What I would say, though, is those changes from 5 years to 12 months residency only applies to the First Home Choice Scheme, which is the open market scheme.
This first fixed scheme, which you're going to reduce to 12 months residency eligibility, well, that's what you're talking about. And I hope the Isle of Man public are listening to this. People who move to the Isle of Man after 12 months will be able to get an interest-free loan to buy up all the properties possibly out there. Well, no, you said that you're going to change the interest fee, sorry. But after 12 months being on the island, very little knowledge of individuals who could be here buying up all of these properties and getting support from the government to buy them.
Again, there is no proposal to change the residency criteria for the fixed scheme. That is categorically not what is being proposed here. The fixed scheme, which deals with first-time buyer properties, is categorically not changing.
First-time buyers.
Not changing
the open
in respect
market
of residency criteria. That is not the case.
Now it's time for sport with Rob Pritchard. Faster my Rob.
Faster my. Well, first off, a goal from Manx hockey competitor Sienna Dunn couldn't stop the England under-21 women's team falling to defeat to the USA in the Junior Women's World Cup yesterday. Having been eliminated from the main knockout phase 2 days earlier, England fell to a 2-1 loss against their opponents during the positional playoff phase of the tournament. Olivia Bent-Cole put the USA in front on 21 minutes before former Valkyries player Dunn, who's captaining England this year, drew England level on 53 minutes. However, that was short-lived as less than a minute later the USA grabbed a second and decisive goal through Reece Dariano to take victory. England returned to action again at the tournament in Santiago, Chile on Friday when they face Australia in the 7th-8th place playoff match. Well, at the last edition of the competition in 2023, which Dunn was also part of, England went on to finish 4th. In athletics, Isle of Man athlete David Malarkey managed a podium finish whilst out during his latest racing test in the United States. Competing in the Manchester Road Race in Connecticut, the Manxman came second and completed the 4.7-mile course in 20 minutes and 58 seconds. Whilst his time was in fact inside the previous course record, it wasn't enough to take top spot. That went to Kenyan runner Edwin Kurgat, an Olympian in 2024 and former World Championship competitor, who crossed the line not far ahead of Malarkey in 20 minutes and 54 seconds. And finally, elsewhere, a new state-of-the-art dedicated indoor cricket facility on the Isle of Man has now opened to the public. The facility on Cars Lane in Tramode is intended to offer services in the sport throughout the year. There are also hopes to introduce mixed indoor cricket games at the venue in future. Among the facilities available are 4 lanes, a separate fielding area and 5 bowling machines, which includes one that is only used by 30 other clubs around the world. Well, Isle of Man Cricket says anyone wishing to book slots at the site can now do so by visiting booking.iomcricket.co.uk. And the organisation adds further programmes including holiday camps, future red caps, crit kids and indoor activities will be available to book soon along with coach education.
Thank you, Rob. And that's it for Update for today, compiled from the resources of Manx Radio's News Department. Thank you to newsreader Lewis Foster. And if you have a comment on the news agenda, maybe a story you think we should be covering, or just want to say hello, drop us an email at update@manxradio.com. And the stories you've heard on this programme, plus much more Manx news, interviews, podcasts, and the web's biggest source of Manx videos are all at manxradio.com and via the free Manx Radio app. Give Manx Radio a like on Facebook, follow us on X, and subscribe to the Manx Radio YouTube channel. And that's it from me for Update for this week. Thank you so much for your company. Coming up next, it is Spotlight with Howard Kane. Enjoy the rest of your week, folks. See you soon.
Your Chief Minister, Aaron Michael MHK, Alfred Cannon, is next on Man in Line as we head towards 2026 and a general election. How does he view the many challenges of coping with Manxcare's budget issues, population growth and immigration, offshore and onshore wind not finalised, the battle to secure business and inward investment, backbench calls for higher taxes, and the Moneyval inspection looming on the horizon? I'm Andy Wint, and you can talk to Chief Minister Alfred Cannon MHK this Friday at midday on smart devices, on air, online, on Manx Radio.
You can't put a price on keeping safe, but rest assured, you'll be happy, roadworthy and safe for a fair price at Quayside Tyre and Service Centre on South Quay Industrial Estate, where trained technicians go above and beyond to give you the best customer experience. With any service, they'll provide you with a video of any defects that need attention and will only carry out the work if you're happy. For a comprehensive range of services and more information, call 664417 or visit online.
I've bought all the Christmas presents, the freezer's stocked up, and I've got the decorations out the loft.
Sit down, my love. You like a cup of tea?
Jeffrey, have you had a blow to the head?
No, my dear. 'Tis a season of goodwill. I just wanted to show my appreciation.
Oh, Jeffrey, I do love you.
And I love you as well. Plus our new Spectrum windows.
A happy Christmas to all our satisfied customers and new customers to come from Spectrum Windows. Oh, and Jeffrey and the missus.
Happy Christmas, everyone.
Here at Q-Plus, we're not just blue, we're green. From smart boilers to heat pumps, Q-Plus supply products from the leading brands in renewable energy for a cleaner, greener home. So call into Q-Plus on Snugborough Trading Estate, the island's largest independent plumbing and heating merchants for trade and retail. Or call 673-131 to talk to our friendly experts about the latest cost-effective products in home heating and find out what we can do for you at Q-Plus.
Employers, having trouble with staff and need reliable advice?
Employees, are you treated fairly in the workplace or do you have a grievance?
The workplace can be problematic on both sides. For any work-related legal issue, contact the employment law experts, Man Benham. They advise employers and staff on all work-related problems with sound professional advice and a transparent fee policy. To arrange your free consultation at Man Benham, call today on 639 350.
Man Benham, here for you.
Hello, welcome to Spotlight. Putting an arty bauble on top of your hand